Good afternoon to everybody and welcome to the 157th edition of the Global Weather Report, live here from Mark Vogan Weather HQ in Northern Scotland. How is everybody on this fine afternoon? Wouldn't be me without screwing up the words pretty quickly, but nevertheless, how's everybody doing this afternoon? Have you got the Sunday roast on, cooking away in the background, or are you having perhaps a lighter Sunday evening? Let me know in the live chat below what you're having for your Sunday evening dinner. Good afternoon to our very own Paul James. Hope you're doing well, my friend, down in Hampshire. What is the weather like down in Hampshire, Paul? It's just gone 4 p.m. this afternoon. We obviously have quite a substantial drop in temperature compared to recent days, especially the further south and east you go. Fairly nondescript weather in terms of September warmth for sure across the bulk of the UK as well as Ireland. We've had a tremendous amount of rainfall through that central swathe of the British Isles over the last few days. Very little, if any, in fact, across the far north and south. So quite a distinct contrast between some places and other places regarding rainfall. Good afternoon to Braemar, Ballard, Deeside and Donside weather. Hi, sorry I'm late. No, you're not actually, Chris. Literally just went live, my friend, so you have not missed anything. Paul saying, fair, dry and breezy, 15 Celsius. Yep, the current temperatures are in fact bouncing between upper single figures. When you've got a shower blowing through this area, the temperature's dropping into the high single figures. And then with the sun shining, and that's been a kind of back and forth cycle throughout the course of the day where we've seen sunshine and showers, fairly brisk northerly breeze blowing, making it feel distinctly chilly. But it's one of those kind of times of the year when the sun is out, you can actually still feel the warmth in the sun. When the sun disappears and you've got that breeze, it feels rather chilly. And it'll be interesting to see how chilly the next few nights turn out to be across the UK, especially away from urban centres, as we get the clear skies and lighter winds, and we've got this cool early brand Arctic air in place. Good afternoon to Lindsay Vogan, and good to see Paul and Lindsay on the moderating team this afternoon. So as always, greatly appreciated for your kind support. Lots going on weather-wise around the planet at the moment. We've had record-breaking warmth in the Canaries, temperatures as high as 41 Celsius in parts of the Canaries yesterday afternoon. We've seen temperatures into the upper 30s yet again in Iberia, and near continent we've seen temperatures into the high 20s, low 30s. We've seen early season snow, but not really early as such. Up in the northeast of Siberia, temperatures into the teens below freezing. We'll look at some current temperatures up in eastern Siberia shortly. Good afternoon to David Bond. Good afternoon. It's good to see you, my friend, and hope you're well. So, yes, and we've obviously got the twin super typhoons in the West Pacific to look at, Neoguri and Ragasa, where Ragasa will be passing between Taiwan and the Philippines. It peaked at 160 mile per hour, pressure down to 900 millibars. Looking quite spectacular on visible satellite imagery, infrared imagery as well. I believe it's undergoing an eyewall replacement cycle at the moment, so it is fluctuating in terms of its intensity, but it will have significant influence on both Taiwan and the Philippines before hitting the eastern China as a weaker system. Good afternoon to David Vogan down in Kirkintilloch as well. Struggling to put message on, not a problem, Dad, but it's good to see you on today's live anyway. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're enjoying your Sunday. I know you had a good morning at church, good turnout, I think, and yes, that is good to hear. So yes, How is everybody doing? What are you having for your Sunday dinner? I believe we're having a roast chicken dinner that is will probably be soon enough going on to into the oven. So yep, looking forward to that a little bit later on. So yep, let's say very quickly. I want to show you the temperatures. This is a little bit random of a start, but this is the temperatures yesterday afternoon in Iberia. So these were the maximums yesterday. So we did have temperatures into the kind of middle 30s in that classic south central region of Spain. We did see 36 Celsius. We've seen some Fern effect up in coastal Basque country of Spain, right up in that north coast. We've seen overnight temperatures, into Saturday morning holding at 26, 27 Celsius during the overnight period. I think we've probably had some winds coming off the interior of the north over the mountains and then down towards the coastline. That downslope Fern effect really influencing the overnight temperatures. We've seen temperatures into the low 30s again in the southwest of France. But these are the current temperatures over Spain and Portugal. A big difference. Look at the north of Iberia in particular. Rather than having upper 20s, low 30s, we're talking about upper teens. So that is a really sharp drop. And temperatures rather than being in the mid to high 30s in south central Spain, we're only talking about 30, 31 Celsius. Still above average, obviously, for the time of the year. But big drop in temperature. Look at southwestern France. Low 30s yesterday. Upper teens during the course of this afternoon. And if we look at the European continent as a whole, the core of that heat is now shifted well east. So we had the upper 20s, low 30s in Germany yesterday afternoon. You're talking about teens. Still holding on to some upper 20s in the southeast of Germany here, far eastern Germany. Poland, we're still talking about temperatures into the upper 20s, low 30s. But look at how fresh the air mass is now across France, Low Countries, Northern Iberia, the UK as well here. And we're starting to cool things off across Scandinavia, if you notice here as well. Looking at the UK specifically then. And we're talking about the temperatures 9, 13 Celsius. It did top 13 this afternoon with the help of sunshine. Like I say, with the sun, it's hard to see the temperature remain below 10, 11 Celsius when you've got a still relatively strong late September sunshine. But when you've got cloud and breeze, temperatures very easily drop into the upper single figures. I was kind of watching carefully my very short period of record. The coldest daytime maximum for September is 11.3 Celsius, and I was curious to see whether that would get challenged or not today, but no, not a chance. Temperatures have well surpassed that level. Good afternoon to Richard Schott, back from his break down in Spain. I do believe he had some nice warm weather during his week away, so I'm glad to hear that Richard had a restful time, probably recharged the batteries, roaring to go again with regards to work. Richard, I'm sure it'll feel like a distant memory, that holiday, once you get back to the grind, my friend, I would imagine. And let me just see here. So, yep, thanks for the sunny summer, says David Bond. You're over in sunny Fife, David. Am I right in saying that? I think you are, my friend. I think you're in the kind of Dunfermline area, I believe, if I'm right in saying, giving away your location if you didn't want it mentioned. So sorry about that. I'm sure you don't mind anyway. It's quite bright here, actually, unfortunately. Fish and fritters with curry sauce is what my dad is having for his dinner tonight. Just got home in time from Spain, but cold here today in the UK, says Rich. Yes, it certainly is. Let me just see here if there's anything else. Good afternoon to Paul Farwell. Quick hello from near Antalya. You notice here I kind of avoided trying to pronounce that. Coliclia. Is it Coliclia? near Antalya in Turkey. Let's see quickly what kind of weather or temperature, should I say, Paul is enjoying on the coast of Turkey. So we're talking about 30, 32 Celsius in Kars, Marmaris, 31.5 Celsius. Bearing in mind now we're into the evening time over in the far east of the continent. Obviously, this is technically Asia, but nevertheless, certainly some nice warm weather. That pitch looked well soaked. Obviously, talking about football. Going to be down spending the weekend next weekend with my dad. We're going to take in the Dunfermline against Partick Thistle game, which I'm quite looking forward to. Some of those championship games are pretty decent, I must admit. Even the standard of football, I think, has been quite impressive this season so far. Obviously, still early days. But yeah, looking forward to a little trip down to see Dad next weekend. We're going to go to the football, like I say, and on the Saturday evening, probably a 7:30 start for the winter, the first of two winter updates that I'm going to be delivering this autumn season here. So next Saturday night at 7:30 p.m, join me for the first winter update of building the ideas and the overall forecast for the 25-26 winter season for UK, Ireland and Europe. I'm getting pretty excited now. We're long out of summer, or it feels that way anyway, and I'm starting to, with these chillier days and nights, starting to get a little bit of a hankering for winter-like weather. When will we see the first snows? Well, certainly up in the tops of the mountains. This afternoon we are seeing some snowfall, which is good to see, if you like that sort of thing, that is. But you can see here, this is the latest visible satellite imagery showing that there's the frontal system that brought the tremendous amounts of rain in the last 24-36 hours across particularly central North Wales into the North Midlands, northern England. Like I say, not an awful lot of rain further north and south of that band, but that band really set up, and we're seeing some very heavy wind-driven rain during the course of Saturday. Now that frontal system is now moving into eastern France, through the Low Countries into Germany, hence why we're seeing the temperatures drop quite substantially. It's also pushed through Iberia and gradually starting to chip away at that really intense warmth down across the south of Iberia. If you haven't already done so, and at least before you go, please hit that like button if you're enjoying the content here on this channel. We're trying to provide a wide variation of content, looking at UK, Ireland, Europe, the tropics every Saturday, and then we're also looking at the bigger, broader global view as well. And certainly there is a lot of things to consider and discuss. Good afternoon to Hazel. Good afternoon to Spock's daughter as well. Just arrived from mid-Wiltshire, says Spock's daughter. Good afternoon to Sink Splint. So we've got three of our moderators on this afternoon. It's fantastic to see Sink Splint, to Paul James and to Lindsay Vogan is much appreciated. So yeah, you can see here very clearly, if we zoom in, you can see the distinct northerly north to south movement in the convective clouds here, blowing in on a cold northerly wind, with the sunshine not feeling too bad in the breeze and in the showers. It certainly feels distinctly chilly out there for sure. And looking at the UK temperature specifically then, did I show you? I may have, I can't remember. But you can see here 9 to 12. Yeah, I did actually. I'm just remembering that now. I think I'm starting to get a little bit confused in my old age. So current temperature is 8.1 with a wind chill in Aviemore down to 6 Celsius. And even across the far south, yeah, we only held on to 20, 21, 22 Celsius yesterday afternoon. Far cry from the 27.8 that was achieved in the southeast on Friday afternoon. It was always expected to be a fairly short-lived surge of warmth. In terms of the globe, we will look at the tropics in a bit of detail in just a second here, but in terms of global temperatures, this is how things are looking. So we've got a minus 20 Celsius in central Greenland at the moment. Not really much of a surprise over the very, very high elevated ice pack in central Greenland. We're talking about some fairly chilly air over Iceland, over the UK and Ireland, and over Scandinavia, and that heat, like I say, is getting forced eastwards over Europe. You have to go into North Africa, where we're still holding on to some decent warmth. Like I say, temperatures into the kind of mid to high 30s, even 40, 41 Celsius in parts of the Canary Islands yesterday afternoon. Quite a big difference even down here. Look at this here. Instead of 41 Celsius on that northeast corner of Tenerife yesterday, we're only talking about 30 Celsius this afternoon. So a good 10 Celsius drop, but still pretty hot, it has to be said, on the east coast of Tenerife and also in Santa Cruz de la Palma. So you can see that there, 27 Celsius, 29 into the typical touristy spots of Gran Canaria, Tenerife, Fuerteventura, Lanzarote. We're talking about 24 Celsius in the Arrecife area. Puerto del Rosario, we're talking about 25 Celsius, and then generally mid to high 20s around the volcanic island. Well, most of them are volcanic anyway, right enough, but the volcanic island of Gran Canaria. Still talking about low 30s over northern portions of Algeria. Some very hot conditions in Tunisia. Folks happen to be holidaying in Malta. I think we're generally talking about mid-20s here. In the Crete, in the Cyprus, we're talking about the upper 20s, low 30s. Again, there's the Antalya region right there. So we're talking about temperatures of 30 Celsius, not too shabby at all. Into the Middle East, we're still holding on to some intense heat. So we did see, I think, a temperature, a maximum in Kuwait City yesterday of 48 Celsius, which is pretty impressive for late September, it must be said. We're talking about generally mid-30s in and around Qatar, the UAE, into Oman as well. And then obviously once you get into India, where we're starting to gradually see the Indian monsoon withdraw. It will be a slow old process, but we are still seeing some fairly heavy flooding rains in parts of India, in the Bangladesh. Starting to pull away now from Punjab and into Pakistan. We've seen some big rains over Southeast Asia over the last recent months here. So if we zoom out and head further north, intense hot summer anywhere from Southeast Asia, but particularly up the eastern side of China, where it was the warmest summer on record. The Koreas, Japan, just relentless day after day of mid to high 30s in such cities as Shanghai, into Seoul, and also Tokyo, Japan as well. Getting further north, we are starting to see things cooling down, as you would expect to see, at least. But we've got a current temperature in Jakutsk. I don't know if that's I think it is the Yakutsk area. But we did see temperatures into the teens below freezing the last time I checked up in northeastern Siberia. Then if we move across the North Pacific into North America, still hold on to some fairly decent warmth, even up across the north of Canada, northern portions of Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba. We're seeing temperatures still fairly mild for the time of the year. We're starting to see some minus digits in the northwest up into Yukon and Alaska. Along the Brooks Range, north of that Brooks Range, you would typically expect to see temperatures into the low single figures and minus temperatures at this time of the year. In terms of rainfall then, just let me have a quick sip of the coffee. Paul James saying, old age mark, really? Question mark, question mark. Yeah, I know. just feel as if every year it just kind of each year kind of blends into another, and I start forgetting about what type of summer, what type of winter we had. 2017, 18, we obviously know what happened in that year, but you feel as if the kind of 2013s, 14s, 15s, 16s, they all kind of blend together. Don't know if it's just me or not, but yeah. So yeah, you can see here some fairly big rainfall amounts. These are 24-hour rainfall totals. Look at Western Europe here. That's quite interesting. Obviously, it was wet across the central swathe of the UK, but it's been pretty wet over the last 24 hours across much of Western Europe, anywhere from central Spain all the way up into southern Scandinavia. Look at this kind of band here. East of that, obviously, we've still got the heat. East Germany into Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, Austria. We've seen some unbelievable tropical nights at the 1,700 metres above sea level, an all-time record warm nighttime temperature at that elevation in the mountains of Austria. Amazing to think that you would expect to see that maybe kind of anywhere from late June to late August, but late September to see a temperature of 20 Celsius at the 1,700 meters in the mountains is pretty incredible. Good afternoon to Ethan Harris. Mark, what do you think of this September's temperature will come out at? I think it'll be close to average, if I'm being honest, Ethan, and I think it'll be wetter than average. Now, it is actually drier than average up here across the north, and my lowest rainfall for the month of September, this is only my 3rd September, so it's not a particularly great sample size by any stretch, but this could well be my driest September on record. Here, it's 63 millimetres. I think you're kind of sitting, if you're lucky, at about 40 millimetres or so here. But I wouldn't be surprised, following the driest August on record, I wouldn't be surprised if it was the driest September on record. But very notable here, that swathe from much of Wales, North Midlands, into the north of England, clipping the south of Scotland, was seen a very intense area of rainfall. That frontal boundary with a waving weather front that kind of just pumped moisture along that boundary. Like I say, little rain in the north, little rain in the south, but in between. And it's been a wet September. It's wetter than average actually across the southwest, the South Wales, into parts of the Midlands as well. Fairly dry once you get east of the Pennines, up into the east and north of Scotland in particular. Bit of a rain shadow effect here, eastern and northern areas, when you've got a west to southwesterly flow coming in off the Atlantic. So, yeah, not an awful lot of rain, it has to be said here. But you can see the amount of rain that's fallen. I want to show you here a better visual of that rainfall over the last 24 hours or so across the UK. Were you in the rain band? I would be curious to know. This is a nice visual here by Roost Weather. This is Dan Harris at the Met Office. And some places were close to, in parts of Wales, for example, was close to 100 millimetres of rain over a 24-hour period, which is pretty impressive. But north and south, not a whole lot to speak about, it has to be said. And if we look at another view of this rainfall off Meteosail, you can see it very, very nicely indeed. So these are rainfall totals over the last 24 hours and over the last 72 hours. Look at this here. So, yeah, some pretty impressive numbers here, given the fact that it's already been quite a wet September on the back of what has been a very dry August. The question mark is going to be, as we progress through the rest of autumn and into winter time, with the likelihood of a developing La Nina again. I tend to associate La Ninas with a drier pattern overall for the UK, but like I say, week by week, month by month variation in what is likely to be a continued dry signal. But there's shades of 2013-14 in the SST showing up. We'll look at that in more detail next weekend in the Winter Update Live next Saturday night, for example, at the comparison between these sea surface temperatures globally, the Indian Ocean, Pacific, Atlantic, worldwide. We'll look at the comparison between what's happening now versus similarities to the past. That very warm water over the North Pacific, for example, could have a significant burn on the winter regarding the polar vortex, etc., which is, by the way, expected to be weaker than average. So the rest is weather. Good afternoon to you. Arctic sea ice at its lowest for decades. Well, in fact, it's actually the highest in the last 13 years, actually, which is quite interesting. Downstairs, Dave, good afternoon to you. Good afternoon, Mark. Summer still holding on down here in Malaga. Yep, certainly is, my friend. It's certainly been a hot one in recent days. Looking forward to the cooler temperatures. I'm sure you are, Dave. Certainly, I would appreciate cooler temperatures if I was living down in the south of Iberia. But in terms of Arctic sea ice, let's have a quick look then at that. Arctic sea ice, this is from Chris Martz on Twitter, showing that the Arctic sea ice has likely reached its annual minimum and is beginning to expand. It bottomed out at around 4,602 million kilometres squared on September the 10th. This now marks the 13th year in a row that a new record low has been set. This year's SIE minimum is higher than it was in 07, 08, 2011, 2012, 2015, 16, 19, 20, 23 and 24. So we're actually not doing too bad with regards to Arctic sea ice. Obviously, it's still well below normal. There's no getting away from that. The normal line is that hatched mark right there. So obviously, we still remain, I believe, is that the record? Aye, so that's the 2012, I believe. That was the record minimum Arctic sea ice. But you can see here all the years that were lower. So this little line that stopped dead here at the top is higher than all these previous years, which is quite interesting. Given how warm the Northern Hemisphere has been over the summertime, I find this rather interesting. Again, this is going to get built into the ideas, the thinking, and will get discussed in the winter forecast update coming up next weekend as well. So stay tuned for that. But rather interesting stuff, it has to be said. And also, while we're talking about winter, this is the 10 HPA strength of winds circulating the now developing polar vortex within the stratosphere, and it is expected to be actually at record week levels for the end of September. So this thin red line at the bottom is actually the record minimum. The thick red line in the middle is the average, and then the thin red line at the top is actually record strong. And interestingly, it is expected to remain below average right the way into the middle portions of October, which is quite interesting. How much of an influence that has on the pattern, I'm not really that sure, but nevertheless, it is interesting that it is reasonably weak at this moment in time. So let's look at the tropics then. This is how things are looking according to the CIMSS website here, a fantastic tropical weather website here, and they quite often refer to this. I did look at this in a bit more detail in yesterday's tropical outlook, so if you want to look back at the tropical outlook from yesterday, you can do so. And each Saturday I kind of specify on the tropics, and I'll be continuing to do that all the way up to the end of the season. So basically the end of November or thereabouts anyway, I'll continue to do a tropical outlook each weekend here. I've done it every weekend since the beginning of the season, but it's the two standouts. We've got two supers in the West Pacific, one Ragasa and also Niaguri. We've also got an invest area north of Papua New Guinea. Now it's this Ragasa that is the biggest concern. It is the one that is affecting land, specifically the Philippines and also Taiwan as well. It is expected to pass between the two over the next 24 hours or so here, bringing damaging winds and tremendous amounts of rain. In excess of 30 inches of rain or 700 plus millimeters of rain is expected with Ragasa as it passes between the two island nations. We've also got Tropical Storm Gabrielle, still remains a storm as opposed to a hurricane thanks to sheer and dry air. And we've also got an invest area over the East Pacific 97E. So you can see here, if we click onto this, this is the forecast strength and track of Ragasa. So it is expected to pass just to the north of Luzon in the Philippines as a 5, category 5, then weaken slightly to a 4, then a 3 as it moves into southeastern China. And this is likely to be over probably the midweek period, I would imagine, early to midweek. It'll probably make a landfall in eastern China. So that is that. Let's have a look at Niyaguri, also a super typhoon, and it is expected to turn north and weaken as it heads into the cooler waters well to the east of Japan. And then obviously we've got the Tropical Storm Gabrielle. So this is the most active it's been globally in quite some time. And I believe the final week, from the final week of August through the first 16 days of September, there was no named system in the Atlantic. And that is actually a new record, I believe, in terms of no system between something like the 20th of August through the 16th of September with no named system in the Atlantic. That is a new record, which is quite interesting. Things are slowly but surely trying to liven up a wee bit. And yeah, it's quite interesting. That was expected to take place, but I'm really, like I said in yesterday's outlook, I'm really kind of starting to lean towards this season being a below average season. The average in the Atlantic being 14.4 named storms, and we're sitting on 7. Obviously, October can still be a busy month. We've got exceptionally warm waters both in the Caribbean and the Gulf of America. And all it takes is perhaps a spin-off Central America here, a Central American gyre, for example, spinning over Central America, a feature to spin off that over those super warm waters. It doesn't take much for something to develop out of nowhere and just rapidly intensify if you've got the right ingredients, the right atmosphere. You've certainly got the warm waters, but if you just have a small pocket, a small window of opportunity, it doesn't take much for a system to become really super powerful in a very short space of time. So let's look at the latest off NHC then in terms of Gabrielle's status. So we've got this disturbance that continues to shift westwards over the main development region. It's now up to a 40% chance of development according to the National Hurricane Centre. In terms of Gabrielle, 65 mile per hour storm, so it was 50 mile per hour yesterday. It's now up to 65. It is expected to become a hurricane and then move sharp right. The reasons for that is we've got a jet stream that is fairly far south over the United States. Once that system then starts to feel the upper level westerlies and a fairly strong westerly at that, it will take a hard right turn towards Western Europe. Whether it has a direct or indirect influence remains to be seen, but you can see here NHC has this system quickly becoming a hurricane, staying east of Bermuda with some very small, wet, windy, large swell, for example, on the south and east side of Bermuda. We're going to get some fringe effects probably, but nothing significant. If that system was to pass to the west of the island, you would get much greater influence because you've got much stronger wind and storm surge, etc., on the right side of hurricanes and tropical systems in the northern hemisphere. So thankfully, this system is passing on the right side of Bermuda. That means minimal impacts. But you can see here the system heads towards the Azores as a tropical storm. It will possibly be an extra tropical feature by this stage towards the Azores by the time we reach the end of the working week. Looking at some impressive satellite images then, like I say, a 900 millibar, 160 mile per hour super typhoon, the first super typhoon in the Pacific, by the way, since back in February. So we are running below average in the Pacific as well as the Atlantic, which is quite interesting. East Pacific were actually above average, which is quite interesting. We did have a very fast start to the season, remember, back in June, where we just seemed to have one system developing off after another off the west coast of Mexico. But look at this here. Just amazing. This is the Himawari 9-band infrared imagery here. Obviously, the orangey colours represent the very cold cloud tops. Very nice central dense overcast. Very powerful thunderstorms, with cloud tops peaking at minus 90 Celsius here. That tends to show just how powerful the updrafts, the hot towers that circulate around the eye are how powerful these are. So very, very impressive imagery for sure, coming from Ragasa, I think it is. I think I said about 2 or 3 different names in yesterday's Tropical Outlook. By the way, if you watched that, you probably had a giggle to yourself watching that back. So we've obviously got one, but also not one, but 2 super typhoons. So there is Niyaguri, well to the east of Honshu, Japan. There is the beast that is Ragasa, and it's going to have direct impacts, like I say, on the northern Philippines. I think this is Luzon, if I'm right in saying, and then this is the island of Taiwan, the island nation here. Very, very mountainous. Basically, the terrain just literally goes vertical as soon as you leave the coastline and go inland in Taiwan. Hence why this is one of the wettest places in the world when it comes to the interaction. One of the hardest hit places in the world, Philippines, Taiwan, up there with some of the hardest hit, most cyclone-prone locations on the planet, but also can see some remarkable rainfall, in excess of 1,000 millimeters of rainfall within a 24-hour period in Taiwan. It'll be interesting to see some of the figures coming out of Taiwan over the next few days. So let's look then at some of the extremes. We will look at the temperature anomalies globally shortly. What time is it now? It's 20 to 5. I was going to say 20 to 7 for some reason. I don't know why. Love watching how they move. Yep, it really is truly fascinating, Paul. Just watching nature, isn't it? That's why I love weather. I'm sure everybody else loves weather as well. Just the sheer power, the beauty of meteorology, and the tools that we have now is truly amazing to be able to look at all the different freely available tools that is as well. Some of the high resolution images that we can see at our fingertips is outstanding. So my coffee is starting to get a little bit on the cold side, so I'm going to drink a little bit more. Look at this here. This is a tweet here by Cameron H, based in Australia. So we've seen some impressive rains on both sides of the Australian continent in recent months. Perth, for example, seeing some impressive rainfall, as well as Sydney on the opposite side of the country. But the first 41 Celsius of the season arrived in Australia yesterday. So I think this was the day before, if I'm right in saying. Victoria River Downs in Northern Territory recorded a temperature of 41.7 Celsius, ties as the 5th hottest September day on record in the Northern Territories, just 0.3 below the record for the NT, 0.3 Celsius above the site record. Period of record is 60 years. So something pretty intense heat now starting to develop. We're obviously into the spring season down under, and obviously in the southern hemisphere as well. So remarkably warm nighttime temperatures in parts of southern Brazil, Paraguay and Uruguay in recent nights. We could see an all-time record high minimum temperature for the hemisphere. These were the overnight temperatures in the Canaries. This was, I think, on Friday night and the Saturday. Brutal nighttime minimum 32.4 in San Nicolas. We are at record levels for all of Africa for this time of the year. San Nicolas, also the second hottest spot worldwide for overnight temperature, which is interesting, 39.9 in Gran Canaria, Hierro 33.6. But we did see widespread mid-30s, and like I say, a couple of 40 and 41 Celsius readings This was what I was talking about here, that overnight temperature. I said 1,700 meters above sea level. So it's actually 1,800 meters above sea level in the mountains of Austria, a minimum of 20.4 Celsius. Never in 250 years of Austria history has anywhere seen a temperature that warm at that altitude. So no summer heat wave ever made it what happened today on the 20th of September. So very impressive overnight temperatures. We've obviously seen some very impressive temperatures from southern Iberia all the way up into parts of Scandinavia. These were the temperatures yesterday then through the archipelago. A little hard to see, I do appreciate that, but we have widespread mid-30s, a few upper 30s as well. To be had 37, for example, on the east coast of Fuerteventura, 35 on the east of Lanzarote. Interesting tweet here by World Climate Service. More on the North Pacific warming. So we've got this record warmth extending from Japan to the west coast of North America. Seems this has become linked to the reduced Atlantic hurricane activity in some recent years, often contrary to forecast expectations like this year. Prior to 2013, North Pacific SSTs didn't correlate with the Atlantic ACE, but there's been a change. So basically, the very warm waters, let's have a quick look, shall we? And see. I might as well show you the chart while I'm discussing it. So obviously, you've got the super warm waters, and that's been a theme 2023 through 25. We've seen this build-up of warmth in the West Pacific. But that's extending over across the entire North Pacific basin. We've got obviously the La Nina signal here in the equatorial region. Interesting to see the correlation between this warmth to the north versus the cold within the tropics underneath. What influence that has on the atmosphere going into the winter season. We've got this cold pocket now showing up, and it's starting to spread towards the UK and Ireland. Interesting enough, with that jet being stronger than average, throwing one area of low pressure after another towards the UK and Ireland. That's causing the upwelling at the surface here. So we're cooling the waters in the Atlantic basin. Nice tripole showing up here between up to the north, central, and then south of that. Very warm in the Atlantic, but it's the influence of this warm water over the North Pacific that is dampening down the tropical season in the Atlantic basin, which is quite interesting. So that is that. Let me just see here what else I can show everybody. Another nice view of violent typhoon Ragasa. Just see here. Big contrast yesterday. This is Friday, sorry. 14.4 Dundrennan in southern Scotland versus 27.6 at St James's Park in central London. Big contrast northwest, southwest. Big rains. We've obviously seen significant temperature anomalies as well. This is the big drop obviously coming up. This was back a few days ago. The warmth over mainland Europe, the cooling already showing up over the UK. But the contrast between the upcoming 5 days following versus the following 5 couldn't be more stark. Look at this, what's coming during this upcoming work week. So big flip already showing up in the western fringes of the continent. Back to Australia then. This was what I was wanting to show you. As always in this tropical discussion or global discussion, should I say, I go back and forth, and probably that is a little bit annoying, and I do apologise for that. But for 4 months in a row, so that we're referring to Perth in Western Australia here, for 4 months in a row, Perth has exceeded its average monthly rainfall. The first time this has happened in traditionally wet winter and spring periods since 2007. So it's been the wettest, 4 month period in a row since all the way back to 2007 for Perth in Australia. I thought that was quite an interesting one, and obviously we've been seeing some impressive rains on the opposite side of the continent as well. So, yeah. Let me just see if there's anything else I could show you. We talked about, obviously, the Arctic sea ice. And we're also seeing the withdrawal of the Indian monsoon. So let's move on to the Indian monsoon discussion in very briefly. And I pulled this up. This is an AI overview, by the way. So I said 2025 Indian monsoon compared to history. So we're beginning to start to see the slowdown in the winds coming out of the southwest. As the temperatures start to cool in this part of the world, we are going to slowly start to see that mechanism of heating of the land, higher pressure over the ocean versus lower pressure over the subcontinent of Asia. Once we start to see the cooling develop over India, we're going to start to see the winds weaken, and eventually they're going to reverse. Instead of it being from a moist southwesterly direction, driving moisture in over India, we're going to see it coming out of the northeast as we start to cool down the vast landmass of Asia. But how does the Indian monsoon compare this year compared to the past? Well, the 2025 Indian monsoon season was largely above average, with early arrival and strong rainfall for the second consecutive year. So it's been a robust monsoon season in 24 and also in 2025, which is expected to boost agricultural output. Early data showed that record May rainfall, it was the wettest May on record for India, by the way, especially over central India. The season's cumulative rainfall stood at 8% above the long-term average by early September. This contrasts with some historical periods of lower rainfall, but aligns with recent years of above-average performance. Now, cool west versus warmer East Indian Ocean, that is the negative Indian Ocean dipole. That tends to favour a wetter and even a kind of lingering of the Indian monsoon into the deeper autumn when you've got this negative Indian Ocean dipole, by the way. So we've actually had a slight deficit up in the foothills of the Himalayas, typically the wettest part of the world during the summertime, anywhere on the planet. So Maharashtra, for example, and also Cherrapunji tends to receive thousands of millimetres of rain over the summertime. We've actually had below average rainfall in the northeast foothills of the Himalayas, but we've had very wet weather over the northwest of India and extended into Pakistan. So it's been an average, a cumulative average of 8 above normal for India, and the above normal rainfall forecasters predicted that the monsoon would be above normal, and the initial data confirmed this with the 8% above the long-term average. The early arrival certainly gave it a boost. The record rainfall in May also helped boost the monsoon average overall, and obviously this has a very positive effect on the economy here. But I'm trying to see here if there's anything that I can discuss. Highs and lows of history. While the 2025 season is strong, India has historically experienced extreme rainfall events such as the massive rainfall in July 1861 or 1899 monsoon seasons, which registered over 16,000 millimetres of rain in the Kashi Hills. Imagine that, 16,000 millimetres of rain falling. And that is only over the space of a few months, because like out with the monsoon season, it's actually very dry in much of India. So it'll be interesting to see how this compares. I did see comparisons to 1992 with 2025. I'm not sure exactly how strong this is. What, that 8%, how strong is that compared to recent wet monsoon seasons? So that is the discussion in terms of the monsoon. We are beginning to see it withdraw, but very slowly, but surely. It's also seen some extreme rainfall in parts of eastern China in recent times as well. So severe flooding in the Pingyang County of Wenzhou, which recorded 370 millimetres of rain within a 6-hour period and 142.3 millimetres within one single hour. So no surprise that we've got some major flooding as a consequence of that. And again, like I say, eastern China, home to some of the most extreme rainfall in the world when you get that Meiyu front park over central and eastern interior China. This was the scene in excess of 450 millimeters of rain fallen in 2 days in eastern Guangdong. See if I can see this in a better view. And it's been quite the summer in China for heat and for extreme rainfalls. Record string, I think it was at least 27 straight days in Shanghai in excess of 35 Celsius, which is pretty impressive as well. So let's go on to weatherbell.com and see what the averages have been through the 21st. Is it 21st or 22nd? 21st of let's look at rainfall first. In fact, so this is the past 10 days. Let's have a look at the past 30 days in terms of rainfall. This is North America then, or the United States mostly. Very dry across much of Canada, if you notice here, but wet central and western United States away from that far northwest corner, northern Rockies, slightly drier than average. Washington into Montana, for example, into the north of Wyoming. So an interesting, distinct west to east contrast. Very wet through the plain states away from Texas. Very dry through Iowa, Illinois, Missouri, and then into the Tennessee Valley. But look at the Carolinas. Look at the Gulf Coast. Look at up into the New England area. Very dry past 30 days. In this part of North America. Let's have a look at Africa, and we've had a little bit of a decrease in terms of the amount of waves coming off Africa that tend to, with the right conditions, develop into tropical storms and hurricanes in the Atlantic. We've actually had a little bit weaker tropical systems this summer coming off Africa, but you can see a very wet southeast Sudan into Ethiopia. This is the incubation region. This is where these waves tend to develop over the Ethiopian highlands and catch the easterly flow. We've had a little bit of wetter conditions into the far south of the Sahara, drier than average across much of South Africa, for example. Here, a little bit wetter than average is showing up over parts of the central Canary archipelago here, drier than average over the Cabo Verde Islands, which is quite interesting. Looking at Australia over the last 30 days then, and it's been wet across the far north of Queensland, wet in the southwest of Australia, near the Perth area. Interesting how it's been dry across south, central, eastern portions of Queensland, northeastern parts of I get mixed up between Victoria and New South Wales. Drier than average, if you notice here, across South Australia. Wet than average in the South Island of New Zealand. Wet than average across the north of the North Island. Drier than average across the south of the North Island, if that makes sense. Looking at Europe then, and it's been wet. It has been wet across much of Wales, central and northern England. Much of Ireland has been quite wet compared to average here. So pretty much away from the Highlands of Scotland, it's been wet on average past 30 days, which is interesting. Eastern France into the parts of southeast Belgium, parts of southern Germany, wet on average into Poland, into parts of Czech Republic and Slovakia. Bit of a mixture of wet versus dry than average. Wet than average across South Norway, away from the north where it's been very dry compared to average. Wet than average across Sweden and Finland, if you notice here as well. Let's have a look at Asia then. And we'll look at South America, then we'll look at the temperatures and round things up there, I think. Have you enjoyed today's content? I certainly try to mix it up as much as I can. A bit of a whirlwind tour of the globe in terms of rainfall, temperature anomalies, extremes that have taken place. Look at how wet it's been over the last 30 days across central and northeastern China. Drier than average into the east, away from the north of Macau and Hong Kong. Drier than average across Taiwan. So I'd imagine that actually it would be good news to get the rains from Ragasa, not the extreme winds, of course. And look at much of India, especially the north of India. Now, there was an interesting piece of information coming out that the winds, the monsoon winds, actually made it across the top of the Himalayas. Remember, we're talking 24, 25 to as much as 29,000 feet in elevation. That's close to jet stream level. We've been seeing the winds, the moist winds of the monsoon actually cross over the Himalayas and into the Tibetan Plateau, which is interesting. I think that's a very rare event, actually. So I wonder if that's something to do with the depth of the atmosphere being greater, allowing moisture to run. I don't know exactly the physics, the dynamics in play, but certainly that's an interesting one. But look at how wet northern portions of India and through the Himalayan range, even over the top into the very high elevations of the Tibetan Plateau. This is the highest part of the world, really, of course. Very wet across the Philippines as well. Japan's been wetter than average, which is interesting. Then looking at South America, what time are we on? We're approaching 5 o'clock. Very dry across much of Brazil, in the parts of Venezuela, and Colombia. If you notice here, a little bit of wet than average here, so a bit of a mix again of wetter versus drier than average. Parts of southern Paraguay, Uruguay, into the north of Argentina is wetter than average here, if you notice. And globally, let's have a look at the temperature anomalies. So just bear with a second. So yeah, before you leave today's stream, you know what to do. Hit that like button, but more importantly, if you're enjoying the content, hit that subscribe button. It doesn't cost you a single penny. It is absolutely free. So yep, there's no excuse. And we're also starting to get into the winter chat more often than not now. Very warm, much of Europe into western portions of Russia, below average Mongolia and Kazakhstan, warmer than average across Southeast Asia, up the eastern side of China, Korea, Japan, warmer than average. Much of central and northwestern India is cooler than average, warmer than average across Iran, into Pakistan, a mix and match across the African continent. Very distinct east-west contrast over Australia this month so far, cooler central and west. Warmer than average Queensland and all of Eastern. We've got largely warmer than average, but again, a mixture over South America. Contrast between a warm central and western United States versus a cooler east. Very warm, especially the further west over Canada you go. Slightly warmer than average into the Canadian Maritimes, if you notice here. Europe, we're still trying to fight with warmer than average signal with something a little bit cooler. If you notice here, average to below average across Ireland and Northern Ireland. The further east you go over the UK mainland, it's warmer than average. I think we're going to start to see that turning around, by the way, I think over the next few days. This is the 2 meter temperature normally over the last 2 days. And we're going to chip away at that warmth across Wales and England as the colder air sets in. Look at how warm it's been over the last 48 hours across much of the continent, in fact. But in stark contrast, look at Turkey. Quite cold compared to average over the last couple of days. So that is it, I think. I think I've discussed everything that I wanted to. This is, by the way, is a Northern Hemisphere snow and ice. Currently, we're actually slightly above average in terms of snow across the north of Eurasia. Slightly below average, I believe, further west over Russia. And we've obviously discussed the Arctic sea ice. It's in a better state than most years since 2012. And I think we've got little to no snow across North America, with the exceptions of north of the Brooks Range. Very quickly, I want to show you Thierry Goose's Twitter handle just real quick. So we've actually been seeing colder temperatures into eastern Russia. Look at this here. So the first minus 10 Celsius of the season for 2 of the 3 ice boxes of Siberia, Dalyanka and Oymyakon, minus 12.6 and minus 11.4 respectively. If I'm not wrong, the lowest temperature of the season so far in Russia is minus 16.4. That's at an elevation of over 1,200 meters above sea level. Snow depth, so we're now talking about 19 centimeters in one location, 13 and 11 centimeters in a couple of other locations as well. So a massive thank you to everybody for joining in, being a part of it. Thank you to Frog's Legs Matthew. Still waiting for snow, says Matthew. Yep, it will come with time. Just be patient. Hopefully we'll get some snow this upcoming winter season. But yeah, a massive thank you to everybody. Thank you to... can you explain how the nacreous clouds work again? Very, very briefly, Chris. You're talking about the polar stratospheric clouds. Those are the highest clouds within the atmosphere. They're actually in the stratosphere, and that tends to happen when you've got a lobe of the polar vortex that actually moves over our region. That's when you tend to find these polar stratospheric clouds visible when you've got coldest temperatures within the stratosphere overhead. They're obviously more common over the Arctic, the higher latitudes. We do tend to get them when you've got that piece of the PV that drifts overhead. I hope that very briefly explains that one, Chris. So a massive thank you to everybody for tuning in, and thank you to the moderators, to Paul James, to Lindsay Vogan, and to Sing Splint for moderating today's stream, for everybody taking part. If you have left a comment, I do apologise for not perhaps answering. And also stay tuned, 7:30 p.m. next Saturday evening, the first of 2 winter updates. We're going to be looking at the polar vortex strength, the global SSTs, the negative Indian Ocean dipole, the developing La Nina, past years comparisons, and also what I genuinely think may happen. I will give you a little bit of an opinion on that as well. So massive thank you to the moderators, to Paul, to Mara Ballard, D-side and Donside Weather, Richard Trott. Thanks to Hazel for tuning in earlier on. Good afternoon, and thank you as well to Luka Marinkovich. I will get there. I did try. To Spock's daughter, to Adam Blunsden. So yeah, downstairs Dave. Thanks to Lindsay for the sticker, the super thanks. Ethan Harris. I think that's pretty much it. So a massive thank you to everybody. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your Sunday and weekend. Join me tomorrow for the European Outlook, and it should be a good weekend coming up here on the channel. So hit that subscribe button if you haven't already done so, and have a great one. Take care, and thanks again. Bye-bye.